Welcome to the Celtic Wisdom of Cycles. I'm delighted to be here. Mary Kennedy's my name, and I'm delighted to be here with Katrina Brady.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here again.
Katrina is an amazing astrologer. She's based here in Ireland too, and we're delighted. We've come together in the last couple of festivals, the Celtic festivals, just to have a conversation around what are the energies of the festivals, you know, what's happening astrologically for each of these festivals, and then to how do we work with those energies. So maybe I'll kick off with what's what this whole festival of Lughnasa is about. So we're moving in. Tomorrow is the fixed day on which Lughnasa, the great festival of the harvest, is celebrated. But it often happens that there's celebrations right through the first 2 weeks in August. Katrina will talk to us about the astrological date. And then also in Ireland, Reek Sunday or Crumdove, Dona Crumdove was celebrated in July, the last Sunday in July, which tended to be more Christianized version of the beginning of the harvest celebrations. So so Lughnasa, as the name suggests, is in honor of Lu, the great god Lu, who has a spear, and he saved the harvest basically from Crumdove, the underworld, who had captured the harvest. Sometimes that's in mythology. It's the account is that he has captured the goddess of the harvest, the goddess of the earth, Etna. But sometimes, Crumdove means crooked one, the dark crooked one. And one of the feats of Lu one of his great victories was over Crumdove, where Crumdove was capturing the harvest and he released the harvest so that the tribe would be fed by the yield of the harvest. The goddess was freed. And in another one, then Lu is said to have victory over Balor, who was actually his grandfather. But Balor would bring blight on. He represented kind of the unhealthy solar masculine, or the harmful aspect of the solar masculine. So with his eye, he could bring blight on the land. And therefore the harvest wouldn't yield. They wouldn't yield a harvest. And again, Lu has victory over Balor, and then becomes High King from Bress in that same battle, the Battle of Moytira. So that's the kind of some of the mythology. The other mythology around Lughnasa is, again, because Lughnasa means the assembly of Lu, and it was a time when the tribe gathered to celebrate, to give thanks to the goddess of the earth, and to sacrifice for the goddess of the earth, to offer sacrifice in order that there would be a good yield that would see them through the dark winter. So one of the great myths around Lughnasa, which I kind of love, is the myth of Taltu, who was Lu's foster mother. And she, according to the annals of Ireland, she died of exhaustion clearing the land, the midlands of Ireland. And she represents, again, that goddess of the earth goddess who sacrifices herself through the harvest in order for the tribe to harvest and yield, have a bountiful yield. So this is, again, a beautiful, and he organizes funereal games, so games in honor of her for her funeral. And it's beautiful because it brings in, the joy of the harvest, the sadness of the end of summer, the fact that we're moving back into the darkness. So that's a more challenging time for would have been for the tribes back then, for the Celts back then. So, and the pre-Celts, of course, celebrated this too. But this is another theme that we work with. But it was a time of great merriment. There's a wonderful Maura MacNeil's 1962 book called Lughnasa, is like this beautiful tomb it's the most wonderful book to take out of the library, and or I don't know if you can take it out. I think it's so precious you can't take it out, but you can read it in the library. Hers is a magnificent study of this festival, because she said that what was amazing about Lughnasa was that even in the 19th and 20th century, there was an amazing amount of Lughnasa celebrations that still held a lot of pagan qualities in the celebration, that they hadn't actually been Christianized. So hers is wonderful. So let's see, what else might I just bring in here? How was it celebrated in more kind of recent time? Well, let's go back to how it was celebrated in the more ancient times. It was the assembly of the tribes. Often laws were passed at this time. The horses were driven through water as a way of purification. And if you remember Bealtaine, cows were driven through fire. So cows represented the feminine, and they're driven through the masculine fire for purification. At this festival, horses, which represent the solar masculine, are driven through water, which is again a symbol of the feminine, and tempering. We have to temper that solar masculine, otherwise it can cause destruction. And the sacrifice of a bull was often was known to, like, an older bull would be sacrificed, and that's connected into the Crumdove legend of Crumdove, because Lu had a triumph over Crumdove and his bull. So that was often, that sacrifice of the bull was part of it. And then there were games, a lot of games, and games between the tribes, athletic games. And actually in the Great Celtic revival in the 1920s, there was a whole attempt to revive what was called Tailteann games in County Meath, which was often compared to the kind of the Celtic Olympics. So this is all connected to merriment. And then there was matchmaking and, trial marriages. You could get married and then come back a year later, and if it hadn't worked, then you got to.
It sounds so progressive.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we saw it at Bealtaine as well. Yeah, but it was that sense of, and that's the whole kind of bringing together of that masculine, feminine, like we saw at Bealtaine too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that there in that sort of mythology, that there's this polarity between a healthy and sort of an unhealthy expression of masculine energy as well, which I feel like, we're really coming back into that awareness at the time of, unhealthy and healthy manifestations of feminine energy and masculine energy. But I think that's so beautiful that was a part of their teachings, that they had that awareness back then, which is like, now we're just like, oh yeah, there's different ways. There's healthy and unhealthy patriarchy. There's unhealthy and healthy matriarchy.
It's so true. And this is where I think
of their own culture,
Yeah, this is how I work with it. It really shows us this is the great wisdom of cycles, which we've lost in this more patriarchal, linear way of being in the world. And it's right through the whole Celtic wheel is this theme of the healthy and unhealthy expressions of the masculine. And we live in this over culture, this thing is over scheduled, over functioning, overdoing, and this is a real call to come back. And particularly at the harvest, it's like, thunderstorms are really auspicious because they're a tempering. The water tempers the heat of the sun, the feminine. So things like rest, that all those practices that are feminine, anything that kind of nourishes us when we're in that over masculine. That's a theme that runs right through, and I love that. But it's particularly at this festival, it's something, because if we let the solar, like if it continues, the heat and beauty of the sun that has brought the crops to this place, the work of the sun and the earth together, but if the sun just continues without any tempering, it would just cause drought. And So yeah, that's one of the great themes to work with at this time. And I suppose maybe let's hand over to you now, Katrina, and you talk, and then we'll come back at the end and I'll give you kind of three ways of working with the energy of Lughnasa in contemporary world. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think these conversations are just always so illuminating to me, because maybe how I would use astrology and how you teach Celtic mythology, you know, there's such similar sort of messages within both of them. So within, as the year sort of progresses and we're looking at sort of the signs, you know, the wheel, the astrological wheel, Lughnasa is fixed fire, you know, so we are in the sun sign of Leo at this time. The astrological or astronomical date for Lughnasa is at the midpoint of Leo, so which would be 15 degrees of Leo, which falls on August 7th this year. It's usually around August 7th. So it's interesting that even though the fixed date would be on August 1st, that I think the celebrations would go on for, you know, a couple of weeks thereafter. So with fixed fire as well, you know, for me, I love working with fixed energy because it is a feminine energy, and fire energy is a masculine energy. So similarly, there is this blend of and with fixed energy, with any of these fixed festivals, you know, whether that's Samhain with the energy of Scorpio, or Imbolc with Aquarius, you know, to me, it's almost like, how do we work with these sort of feminine mysteries? Because with these signs too, you know, sometimes they get perceived as being mysterious as well. And why is that? You know, why, what is happening here as well? Fixed energy, you know, so anytime that the sun is in a fixed sign through the astrological wheel, fixed energy is about coming home to ourselves. You know, fixed energy is the cultivation of our inner self on some level. You know, the way that I teach the signs, you know, how it can be likened to you know, even breathing. You know, when you hold your breath in, it's that invitation of energy within ourselves as well. So within the fixed energy too, you know, there is this cultivation of going inwards within ourselves to hold energy in some capacity as well. So how do we blend this with fire energy? You know, fire energy has to do with our passion and our, particularly with fixed fires, our heart's desires as well, and our truth in a way too. So with fixed fire, it's very much, you know, what is this inward journey of discovering what our passion is, what our truth is, what our heart's desires are as well, you know, which can be a really interesting journey, you know. I think that it's such a precious and unique journey with each individual. This idea that, you know, I'm divinely connected and I have something unique to offer to other people. And there's this radiance when we feel that interconnection of, you know, this is what I love, you know. There's this radiance that come into that. And, you know, I find with any of the fixed signs, there's this sort of powerful nature to it where, you know, whether somebody is really emotionally knows themselves, like with during Samhain, you know, there's that emotional maturity with it. With fixed fires, this confidence that comes through with it when you know what your passion is, you know what your contribution is in some way. It's like this light starts from within ourselves and it emanates from us. You know, this is where that sort of term of what lights you up, you know, this is very much a fixed fire energy that it has with that too. So this time of year to me, you know, would be really important with that. And because it is a sort of a marriage between the feminine and the masculine, it's just sort of a reminder of in the world, it is a masculine energy with the fire energy, but that journey of figuring out what my contribution is, what lights me up, is a truth that I have to, you know, go into myself and figure out that's a personal journey. So sort of like the answers lie within you. It's not necessarily something that you could find out externally. Part of that understanding, that knowing, happens within us.
And I think I'd just love to just offer, because at Mbulk, which is the opposite festival to Lughnasa, we work with the heart's desires. Like, what are your deepest heart's desires? And by Lughnasa, the harvesting of that is your gifts in the world. So
Yes.
these are really, your gifts are deeply rooted to the depths of who you are. And this right now in our world and our planet needs all of us showing up in our gifts. So at Lughnasa, we're harvesting our gifts.
Mhm.
Not in the sense that it's a complete, it's done, but it's this constantly working with, what am I here to contribute? What's unique, and what uniqueness is can I harvest at this time before it dies on the vine? You
Yes.
know,
And I think too, like, it's interesting that within the mythology teachings, that there's this, awareness of the polarity between sadness and joy, which, when we talk about what is it that I uniquely have to contribute, usually what leads us onto that journey is this feeling of emptiness, or feeling like something is missing, which prompts us to sort of go within and be like, well, what do I have to offer? What's special about me? So it's almost like that existential journey of, why am I even here, that often prompts us down that path, which is an interesting sort of another way of looking at it, really. With the astrology of this year too, it's making a beautiful connection to Venus. Venus. So if you look in the night sky tonight for a while, Venus is the evening star. So she appears as the brightest star in the sky. And Uranus is in the sign of Taurus. So since Uranus has moved into Taurus 2 years ago, we would say that we're moving into a phase of sort of reawakening of earth wisdom and cyclical truth and environmental issues. All these sorts of things are coming really into our consciousness as well. So I thought that the messages for this Lughnasa is sort of interesting, because it's sort of also having us remember the importance of this divine creativity, that sort of feeling of, when I create something, there's a sense of, it's not just something that I've made, I'm tapping into something else. These ideas are coming in, it's very much a birthing experience. So there's this idea of interconnection that comes in with that as well. And that feeling too of this sort of familiarity, when we do figure out what is my true passion, what am I here to uniquely offer? I find that there's this feeling of coming home to ourselves, when that happens, where, when that moment where something finally clicks and it's like, this is really what I love to do. There's this feeling of, it's more of a remembrance. It's more of, I already know this, in a way. And I think that's really beautiful. So my two questions that I had to offer, for, well, how can we work with this in a way? So, so one was, what passions do we have that we engage with that feel like coming home to ourselves, And so for me individually, and then I've done, over my lifetime, I've had sort of various interests in all these different things, but sort of what helped me understand what my unique contribution is what really resonated with me, what really felt like I already knew it on some level, in some way. And I feel like that sense of familiarity can really be a pointer towards, this is part of what I should be doing on some level. So to me, that's part of figuring this out as well, what feels like a remembrance. It's not like I'm just learning another tool, in a sense.
so it's also, it sounds like it's a remembrance, but also it brings you joy. There's a joy that in a way signals, oh yeah, this is my gift, my unique gift. Yeah, okay, beautiful. Yeah.
There's
Mm,
such excitement that can come with that as well. You're like, oh,
totally.
this is it. And also, it's not just this is it, but I have something uniquely I have something unique to contribute to this as well, you know. And the second question would be sort of the celebration of our unique individuality as well, you know, like what are my passions, what are my truths at the moment, you know, how am I fulfilling my heart's desires already, you know. Because with fixed fire too, it's you know, it's about stoking our inner fires in a way, feeding our passions, you know. And if we look at it in the span of the year, you know, we've just had the longest days of the year in a way, so it's like how can I this year, because there is this understanding that
I think I
the
lost you there.
light is dimming.
I lost you there for a
Oh,
second, Katrina. Will you just repeat that? You said it was we've just come out of the longest days.
yeah, so it's like, you know, with the longest days of the year, we're sort of, and the days are starting to get shorter. So so I think for me, sort of an interesting reflection out of that is, you know, how do I sort of bottle, you know, all of the joy or the excitement from having so much light in my life, knowing that, you know, the days are going to get shorter, you know, knowing that darker days are coming, you know, in a way. So it's like, how do I sort of bottle up that energy to take with me, you know, as we progress into further into the second half of the year as well. Um,
And in people's chart, if they know their chart, like, is there something they can work with in at this time? Is there like the house or that Leo is in, or
you would be looking at where does 15 degrees of Leo fall in your chart. So this with the Celtic wheel against the birth chart, it's always going, they're fixed points within the chart. So, you know, so it'd be interesting to look at what is 15 degrees of Leo within your chart. It's going to be the same every year, but this is something I'm exploring my own, you know, research at the moment. But they're kind of portals of into possibly these teachings or wisdoms, you know, if we're engaging with Celtic studies or something like that. So so it's an interesting one to look at, and it's always going to sort of activate the other cross quarter festival points in the chart. So as you said, the opposite point would be the Imbolc festival, so 15 degrees of Aquarius. You know, you can look at Bealtaine and Samhain as well. So, you know, you can go really deep into it, or you can just look at, well, what does 15 degrees of Aquarius bring up in my chart as well.
so for me, like my Leo is in my 8th house.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd look for 15 degrees of Leo, where what house that is in my chart. Yeah.
You can look at what house it falls in.
Okay.
So you can look at what house it falls in. And also, you know, do I have any other planets that fall around 15 degrees?
Okay.
Because it would be having a direct conversation with it. So, like, let's say, do I have anything that falls around 15 degrees?
I have Sag at 16 degrees.
You have, what's in Sag?
I have my ascendant at 16 degrees of Sagittarius.
At Sagittarius, yeah. So if you have Sagittarius at 16 degrees, you'd be looking at, okay, there is some sort of what we call in astrology an aspect, which is a conversation, you know. So you'd be looking at, okay, you don't even need to know. I mean, you can look at what that aspect is, you know, if you're an astrologer, but, you know, for people not using astrology, the easiest way to look at it would be like, okay, well, what does my ascendant mean? My ascendant is my approach to life. So it's like, within the wisdom of these fixed festivals, or within the wisdom of Lughnasa, what does this teaching have to offer me around my approach to life, or how people see me as well, about being embodied, you know, as well, which can be an interesting thing, you know. And then you can look into, well, what are the teachings of the 8th house, you know, which is a sort of another, it's the house of the mysteries as well, you know. I always explain it as almost like, you know, sort of the knowing of the elephant in the room, like all those things that sort of the taboos, but, you know, the things that don't get spoken about, but everybody knows, you know, these sort of the sort of mysterious knowings and conversations that that are had and stuff like that. So you can look at it kind of like that as well. So
Okay.
yes,
So the house, and then if there are any other
yeah,
aspects.
connecting in with something in the chart. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
right.
yeah.
That's just useful for me to even look at it in terms of my.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I think for me the three ways of working with the energy of Lughnasa from the Celtic tradition, as the way I work with it is what is this wisdom that from the mythology, from the folk traditions, from this ancient this ancient wisdom, how can I apply it to my contemporary life is really important to me. And so the three ways that I work with it, the first is looking at that sense of like that co-arising of joy and sadness. It's always here. And can we inhabit the joy, like really at Lughnasa, I look at it like, what are my blessings? What am I grateful for? I look back at all the people in my life that have contributed to me. And what have they given me? What am I really, and particularly after COVID, or not after, but with the whole COVID of 2020, we really got a chance to stop, to pause, and a lot of gifts came out of that. Yes, there's a lot of suffering, but that is what the way of being human is. The 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows, as the Taoists say, it's like, can we know that they are both here, and can we inhabit both, and not fall into either, not chase the joy and not, run away from the sadness. The second way that I would work with the Lughnasa energies is to just look at where in my life am I maybe overdoing, in that over culture of, over consuming information, overdoing anything. That's because what it'll start to do is deplete us, and to bring in the practices, feminine practices, which are, both for men and women. We both men and women have feminine and masculine. But there's so much depletion in our culture. So it's like, can we bring these feminine practices in of, anything that brings you joy or creates a lot of pleasure is a feminine practice.
I would teach
And
that
then, yeah,
teaching schools, like it's when there's a fixed sign, it's right after a cardinal sign. So cardinal energy is about sort of the expulsion of energy of, or giving a lot, it is that sort of masculine energy, being in the world and what am I doing, which is that, even though it's Cancer, it is still a cardinal energy. But after that, after we have this, immense giving, in a sense, there's that sense of, it's like almost like when you have a big cry or something like that, then it's like you just withdraw to fill your cup back up. And this is what fixed energy is. It's about going back into ourself and restoring our energy levels in a way.
completely. Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's again, that same polarity as we saw with joy and sadness, which is so much part of that motif within the Celtic tradition, is honoring polarity, knowing this is part of who we are as humans. It's the complexity of being human. And then, yeah, the third is to really look at your gift. What gifts are you bringing into the world? Just as you were talking about, Katrina, it's, we read the world, the planet, humanity needs us all now, really showing up in our gifts and, harvesting what is here to be harvested at this moment, that if it's not harvested now, will be lost. It'll be lost the next cycle. So looking at, like Lou Samaldonach, the many gifted one, it's like our gifts are so important, and we each, and I love the distinction. We're not special, we're unique. And my great teacher, Diane Musho Hamilton, says that. And that's a beauty. It's like, find your unique gift. It's not special, but it's really good in the planet right now. And it's really unique to you. It's like your own soul print. And that's where it comes from. So time to really be with that. I would go out in nature, and go for the Lughnasa celebrations. You go on a height. Up on a height is the place where very close, where the sky and earth meet, and that's the tradition of climbing mountains, going up on a height, and burying the flowers. Some flowers, which means the end of summer. It's just an honoring of that. You bury some flowers. The first sheaf of grain would have been cut. and all just and sacrificed in order to just hope that the harvest will continue. So what we want in our planet and our world now is us all harvesting our gifts and finding our place in the world, and know that when you find your place, you don't need to be the expert at everything. Just find your own unique soul print and step up into that. And I really believe that's part of how we will create and bring in and birth a new world.
Yeah, sure. And to celebrate it as well, our sort of unique expressions that we have to give as well, you know, even if we may not exactly understand what that is yet, you know, it's like, just as you said, going back and acknowledging all the progress that we've made over this year so far, and maybe we haven't exactly figured it out yet, but it's celebrating where we are in our journey towards it as well.
That's such a beautiful, yeah, that's so important, Katrina. Yeah, it's like sometimes what I do is I do this piece around appreciating what maybe my father and mother have given me, you know, or other people that were significant, have been significant in my life. What have they left me? What marks have they left on me? What gifts have they given me? Sometimes it's easier to access it from that and know that I'm still in a process. I'm not 100% sure. You know, I've been in a long process myself of like, what am I
We'll
here
never
to offer?
be 100% sure.
Say that again.
I said we'll never be 100% sure, and I think that everything is evolving all the time, and how we are meant to work is always changing as well. And I feel like that's an important thing to acknowledge as well. Is that?
And and I think particularly, you know, now when we're all kind of, a lot of us are feeling like, how can I help to birth a new world? What's my contribution? To actually know that, to take time, be in the feminine more, step back, listen, keep listening, and it will, you drop into the root deep in order to rise up, you know. So it comes from a resting back, the rising comes from there, which is yeah, you know, when it's really rooted in something deep, from a deep listening. So yeah, so that's us for Lughnasa. If you've anything else to add, Katrina, before we
No.
no, yeah.
No, it's been such a beautiful conversation. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, as always. It's lovely and illuminating for me. I love these conversations, and I wish everybody a very bountiful harvest, and really enjoy and celebrate and be merry. And yeah, we'll see you at the next festival, which is the autumn equinox in about 6 weeks' time.
All
So
right.
thanks everyone for
Yeah,
tuning in.
enjoy. Thank you
Thanks.
for listening.
See ya at the autumn equinox.